my question is about, there are several parts to it, and it's about Pakistan and Afghanistan. What are your thoughts on the American counterinsurgency/counterterrorism approach to terrorism in Afghanistan and Pakistan? Which do you give more of your support to, and do you have ideas for alternate approaches?
Well, first of all, I also thought that you wrote a terrific essay, and wanting to be a diplomat to Pakistan is really asking for a lot of work. I have often said something that you said, which is that Pakistan has everything that gives you an international headache. It has nuclear proliferation and poverty and terrorism and corruption and a weak government, and it's in a very bad location. I also agree with the way you wrote about the fact in terms of supporting counterinsurgency versus just counterterrorism. And the way you put it, in terms of counterterrorism, just kills off some of the top people, but doesn't really deal with the issues of the population. So I would support the counterinsurgency. I think what we're going to see, however, is that it's not going to be easy, because part of the issue, and this is there, as you know, they are now having a campaign, the biggest military campaign in order to get rid of the Taliban in a particular area, and the question is whether they can, counterinsurgency is trying to persuade the population that they will be better off without the control of the Taliban and having a relationship with the central government. So I believe it's the right approach, but I think it's going to take quite a long time. And the question is whether there will be the staying power, not just of the United States, but of the NATO alliance, and whether the government in Kabul will really take hold.
My question is, a major concern for the Republic of Mali is that a majority of the people who live there are illiterate. Have you faced similar problems in other countries, and what steps might you take to resolve it?
The interesting thing about Mali is that it actually is a democracy. And when they had President Kanari, they were able to do many different things, and he, I think, tried to push it forward. I do believe that ultimately it is very important to have an educational system in a country and to try to figure out a way to move forward with the education of the population so that they can take care of themselves. One of the issues that I've been involved in is looking at ways that the poor can be a part of their economy. Poor people are not stupid. Poor people are very entrepreneurial, and they need the tools in order to become a part of their economy. And Mali, I think, is a very good place to kind of look at how you give access to the poor, to the legal system, and make sure that they have rights within the economy. I thought your essay was really very, very thoughtful and provocative about what could be done in Mali.
Thank you.
How would you describe the mood internationally concerning the United States' reputation among our allies and the rest of the world?
Well, I think that our reputation is improving again. It won't surprise you to know that I'm a Democrat. And I actually thought that the policies of the last 8 years damaged our reputation in many different ways. I mean, you all have now had a tour of this library, and I think you can see how much President Clinton did in terms of working internationally, and our reputation was very good. I used to say when President Clinton left office, we had a surplus in the budget and a surplus in goodwill abroad, and both of those were changed in the last 8 years. What is interesting is I am co-chair of an attitude survey done by the Pew Charitable Trusts. I think maybe some of you have seen Andy Kohut on television talking about them, and what we've seen is that with the election of President Obama, the numbers shifted totally in terms of the improvement of our reputation. Now, a sign of that is that he got the Nobel Peace Prize, which was not simple for him. He was criticized for it. The poor man didn't nominate himself. But I think it is a sign. And the issue is how, in fact, he's going to be able to deliver on a lot of the promises that people believe that he has. And part of the improvement in the reputation, I think, comes from the following thing, is a recognition by President Obama that the major problems that are out there are not the kind that can be solved by the United States alone. It doesn't, you can see, it doesn't take a lot to understand that nuclear proliferation and hunger and pandemic disease and climate change and arms control generally require cooperation with other countries. I've been saying actually that President Obama's middle name is Partnership, Barack Partnership Obama, because he really does believe in reaching out, and I think that that's improved the reputation.
Okay. How has women's role changed in government since you started your career?
Well, I started my career a long time ago, and I think things have changed a lot, though not enough, to be frank. I think that, well, I was just talking about this not long ago. I did go to a women's college. I went to Wellesley, where Secretary Clinton also went. She went to college 10 years after me, and I always say, at least I know where she got all her study habits. But when we left college, I left college in 1959, and I had wanted to be a journalist, and I did what you're supposed to do. I worked on a small newspaper while my husband was in the Army, and I did what you're supposed to do. Then we moved back to Chicago. At that stage, there were 4 newspapers, and he was a reporter on a newspaper. We had dinner with his managing editor, and he looked at me and he said, "So what are you going to do, honey?" And I said, "I'm going to work on a newspaper." And he said, "I don't think so." He said, "You can't work on the same paper as your husband because of guild regulations, and you wouldn't want to work on a competing paper and compete with him." And I know exactly what I'd say today, but at that stage, I kind of just saluted and went on and did other things. I didn't get into government until I was 39 years old, and I went to work as a staffer for Senator Edmund Muskie, and I was one of the first women staffers that he had. And then in the Carter administration, where I was on the National Security Council staff, and so there were not a lot of women. There still are not a lot of women, but there are more and more. My youngest granddaughter is 7, and she said to her mother, my daughter, "So what's the big deal about Grandma Maddie being Secretary of State? Only girls are Secretary of State." And in her lifetime, that would be true. But I think that there really are not that many women across the board, and it requires deliberate action by the president or the cabinet members to hire women. One of the things that came out of the Beijing Women's Conference, where I went with First Lady Clinton, was that every country is supposed to have an action plan in terms of hiring women, and the U.S. has to do that too. But there are more women, just not enough.